Hello, everybody. I'm Jim. Today, I want to talk to you about a play. This is the second to last reading on our Great Books reading plan, year one, the penultimate reading. And that comes from the 1990 edition of Great Books of the Western World, not in the first edition. And it's by Heinrich Ibsen. And the play is called The Master Builder. It's one of his later plays. And it's a strange play in a lot of respects. What we're going to do today is summarize it a little bit, give you some discussion questions and a few comments on one of my favorite playwrights, Heinrich Ibsen. Next up on Great Books, Big Ideas. So a quick biographical note about Heinrich Ibsen. He was a Norwegian playwright. He lived in the late 19th century. His dates are 1828 to 1906. He is a giant in terms of modern drama. You could argue he was the man who spearheaded modern drama. As I said, one of my all-time favorite playwrights. I've read all his major plays, except a couple of the early ones I don't think I've hit, but like they really obscure stuff. But he had a great run of about 12 like first-rate plays. His career sort of splits into segments. In his early years, he was more of a romantic writer, and his dramas reflect that. Some of the interesting early dramas, one is called Brand, which I happened to see a YouTube production of, an old black and white, I think it was produced in Britain, starring Patrick McGowan from the Prisoner series. That's definitely one worth watching. I really enjoyed that. And it's an early play, but it sets some of the themes that are big in Ibsen's artistic career. And then another really famous book he wrote, it's kind of a closet drama. I don't know if it's been actually produced all that much for the stage, but it's called Peer Gynt. A famous classical composer did a piece. I forget if it was Grieg or Liszt or one of those people. That's good. These are sort of like the early romantic sort of things. And then he transitions into what I guess you would call more realistic drama. So his middle period is where you find plays like Ghosts and A Doll's House and Enemy of the People, things like that. These are just terrific plays. Oh my God, they're so good. And I used to teach A Doll's House all the time. For a lot of people who, at least in America maybe, who had schooling and maybe even went to college, their exposure to Ibsen is probably limited to A Doll's House. That's his most famous one. And it was a real scandalous, made a big splash in Europe when it came out. Those plays are kind of realistic. And then as he gets into his later career, the realism starts to shade more into symbolic drama. And it's a blurry line between the two because there's aspects of those realistic dramas that are very symbolic. And then as you get into the later plays, though, it shades into more like heavy symbolism. And Master Builder is one of the later plays. It's not his last play, but it's a later one. So you kind of have to read this with like a bicameral view, one eye on the so-called, realistic aspects of the play. And then there are certain things that happen in this play that are like just flat out weird and not realistic, I would argue. They're more haunting, they're more symbolic, thematic. And we'll get into that as we talk about this. Some of his other famous plays are like Hedda Gabler. I mean, that's a big one. The Wild Duck. So many great plays. If you don't know Ibsen, just treat yourself. I think he resonates so strongly, even with our contemporary society. Yeah, I can't sing his praises enough. This summary here is going to get into some spoilers, so you might want to skip if you don't want spoilers. I skip ahead a couple minutes, and we'll pick it up from there. So Act 1 features our protagonist Halvard Solness, who is a successful but also a paranoid master builder. He's essentially an architect who fears being overthrown by the younger generation. Like there's, great drama is built out of conflict, and one of the conflicts here is between the old and the young. And this fear, this paranoia of being overcome, overthrown, leads him to very cruelly exploit his assistant in the office, Ragnar Brovik, and his fiance. He's very manipulative and kind of cruel, because Ragnar is wanting to kind of go out on his own, and he needs some official approval from Solness. And this would please his father, Ragnar's father, who's on his deathbed. And Solness is very reluctant to give him the sanction because he wants to keep him for himself. So Solness's stagnant life with his depressed wife, Aline, is another sort of subplot in the drama. Their marriage is almost dead. And this kind of flatlined relationship is suddenly disrupted by the arrival of Hilda Wangel, who is a vivacious 23-year-old. And she reminds Solness of a promise that he made 10 years ago. So she would have been 13 at the time, when he was up kind of visiting in the north part of Norway. He promised her 10 years ago to give her a, quote, kingdom after she watched him climb a church tower and to sort of hang the wreath on the tower. This is like a thing that builders do. I didn't realize it was a thing until I actually saw it done. There's a sidebar here. The college I worked at, they put up a new nursing building, a building for the nursing school. And when they finished that, I think they had a crane, and they got up on the roof, and on the crown at the peak of the roof, they hung a wreath to celebrate the completion of the building. So Solness did this for this sort of high church tower 10 years ago, and he promised her that he would give her a kingdom, and she tells him that he kissed her, and now she's come back to have him fulfill that vow. The problem is he's forgotten all of this entirely. Like, it has to all be reconstructed, and he's not sure what really happened and what's all kind of a figment of her imagination. But I told you it's a little weird, but it's interesting. And then so we got some conflicts going along. Act 2 is where Solness really is sort of letting he kind of confesses to Hilda, like he opens up a lot to her, and he confesses his overwhelming guilt about how his career as a master builder really only took off after a fire destroyed his wife Aline's ancestral home. And this event indirectly caused the deaths of their twin infant sons. So the house burned down, and then a little bit after that, the twin boys, the infants, died. And so this deep trauma has really crushed Aline, and it's caused a lot of guilt in Solness's heart. Hilda encourages him to break free. Just leave that paralyzing guilt behind. Stop holding back Ragnar's career and stand tall. Become the truly great creator that you are. You are a master builder. You owe me a kingdom. You got to do it. And he's sort of swept up by all this youthful energy and beauty and the idealism. And he vows to build this new home. I think he calls it a villa for himself and his wife, with a massive tower. And then they will rule their own kingdom together, this castle in the air, if you will. We're really getting into some like sort of trippy symbolic territory here. And then Act 3 really centers around the dedication ceremony for the new villa. And Aileen and the townspeople are death afraid that Solness is going to actually ascend and hang the wreath at the top of the tower. But he has vertigo. He has a fear of heights. His health isn't that great. And she's just kind of fearful that that Hilda's fanatical desire to see the master builder achieve this absolute greatness is going to be tragic, like lead to a tragic fall. And so it turns out, here's a spoiler, so it turns out that Solness overcomes his fears. He climbs the scaffolding to place the traditional wreath at the peak of the tower, and just as he reaches the heights, he hears Hilda's ecstatic cheering, and I think he maybe even waves, and then he loses his balance and he plunges to the ground and dies. And that's sort of where the play lands, literally. So it's hard to know what to make of this, but I really think you have to approach this play symbolically. What's going on here in these later plays, I would argue, is a lot of psychological projection. And it almost plays like a dream sequence. And there's a kind of mysticism and idealism. There's a lot of irony. And we're really exploring the internal workings of Solness's soul for the most part. And you also see a shift in Solness's career. So in his early career, he built churches to God, but now in his mid to late career, he's building homes for human beings. I kind of see him almost as like a suburban developer, something along those lines. And he doesn't build high towers so much anymore. And he's going to come back down to earth. But that seems to be like a symbolic shift from like the aspirational, the idealistic, the holy, to the secular and to the conventional, and not taking as many artistic chances or liberties. But he's got a lot of hubris, a huge ego, and he's got these women around him, the fiance of Ragnar, and then now Hilda, who really fawn on him, and they seem very devoted. They're like groupies almost. And then he's got this fraught relationship to his wife. He really sees through him, but she's so crushed by the trauma that they've experienced that there's not a lot left for her other than sort of sullenness. Hilda is a fascinating character. She is almost less of a literal character and more of a spiritual force, or an externalization, a projection of Solness's inner desires. She tells him what he wants to hear. And she's like the troll inside him. She's kind of egging him on to do greater things. She can be seen as this elemental force of nature who is unlocking the vanity that's kind of underneath all this paranoia and guilt. And she's like the enabler to like open that up and let him out. But this is the very thing that's going to destroy him. So we have a blurring of the line between objective reality and the supernatural or symbolic forces of the subconscious mind and what drives people. So it's also a play about aging and the fears, the insecurity, the paranoia that goes along with that. Like you feel yourself in the process of being replaced. Like that threat is very prominent in the play. And it's also, I think, a play about art, about creative genius, and what happens as you age into the later part of your artistic career. Like I said, we should remind ourselves that Ibsen is at this point heavily into the symbolic drama mode, and there are no easy right answers or interpretations when we look at the motivations of characters like Hilda or Aline or Solness and so forth. This might all be a lot of projection going on. And I think it's a no-brainer that critics have often seen Solness as a proxy for Ibsen himself. Ibsen, the master builder of great modern dramas, who is now in his 60s, aging out. There's a young crop of Scandinavian playwrights like Strindberg, who are on the move. Maybe he felt like he was being replaced by the younger generation, or he felt that threat. I always would tell my students when we would read drama, see if you can find a theatrical version to watch, because it helps you to understand the play. Like, plays are meant to be performed. And we're lucky that Jonathan Demme, he produced a version of The Master Builder, and you can get this, he directed it, you can get this on the Criterion, that's published by Criterion, and this features Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. So fans of My Dinner with Andre, such as myself, this was a no-brainer for me to get, and they do a terrific job. Wallace Shawn is Solness, and Andre plays the father of the assistant architect Ragnar. The woman who plays Hilda was just incredible, and I'm trying to find her name. Well, Julie Haggerty plays the wife, Aileen. Larry Pine, he must be Ragnar. And who is Hilda? Lisa Joyce. Lisa Joyce plays Hilda. And yeah, I couldn't take my eyes off her in this film. Like, she just nailed it. She nailed that character. The mix of flirtation and allure and kind of like crazy idealism and intensity, and wow. Now, okay, so in this film version, they put a little frame around the film, which I'm not going to spoil for you, but it's a definite departure from the actual play, and it's a significant one. So you would best call this an adaptation, but in almost every other respect, I mean, there's license they took in terms of the setting and so forth. It was filmed in America and whatnot. But in terms of the inner workings of the play, I think they just nailed the inner spirit of Ibsen's play. They didn't depart so much from the dynamics at all. So it's definitely worth a watch if you're into that kind of thing. Anyway, I think it's on the Criterion website, there's an essay about this version written by Michael Sragow called A Master Builder, Ibsen in Nyack, New York, that is. So I just want to quote this one paragraph to give you a little bit of an interpretation that it's about the film, but it's also about the play. Here we go. Solness is one of those can-do men afflicted with a masculine form of magical thinking. Blending hubris and insecurity, he ascribes his success to mysterious forces that enabled him to bend fate. He's convinced that by overlooking a crack in his home chimney, he caused the pivotal fire that indirectly resulted in the deaths of his and Aileen's twin baby boys, and ultimately fueled his rise, though the blaze actually started in a clothes closet. This is not what caused the fire, but he's kind of talked himself into thinking that. It's part of his personal mythology, I would say. All right, back to the quote. Astonishingly, the couple maintained nurseries when they moved into another house, and Solness has built rooms for children in the home he is finishing. And when Hilda comes to visit, she stays in the nursery. That's maybe symbolic. It's one of the most stunning examples in literature of a man believing that some grand action can heal a deep psychological wound. He's infuriating, befuddling, and pathetic, but he's also a charismatic character. For one thing, he really is an artist with magnificent spires to realistic family homes and finally extravagant dream palaces. As Scottish critic William Archer first pointed out, his evolution mirrors that of Ibsen himself, who went from romantic dramas like Peer Gynt to social dramas like A Doll's House, and then to spiritual dramas like The Master Builder, the equivalent of Solness's Castles in the Air. I think it's totally okay to read biography into this. Okay, here are a few discussion topics to think about, to write about, to talk about with other people, or to comment on down below. Let's think about the fatal fall at the end of the play. Do you view Solness's death as a tragedy of a broken man, a pathetic man, or a glorious artistic statement where he chose death over mediocrity? One last time, he climbed up to the heights, laid that wreath. He went out in style. What do you think? Does it fall somewhere in between? It's ambivalent. In some sense, this play is a play about power dynamics within, families and just social groupings. It's also a work drama. You could trace the power dynamics in this play. Look at how power shifts in every scene, like who's on top, who's subservient. How does that change from scene to scene? And look particularly at how Solness dominates his employees, but then the tables turn and he becomes dominated by Hilda. Hilda is a force of nature. Let's think a little bit about Hilda as a catalyst in the play. The play really kicks into gear when she shows up. She symbolizes the younger generation knocking at the door, at Solness's door, and yet she does not displace Solness. Instead, she's a catalyst. She's pushing him upward, which is then going to lead to his death. Is she acting as a muse who frees Solness from his fears, from his guilt, the shackles of his marriage? Or is she a destructive force, exploiting his age and his vanity? You could talk for a long time about her motivations. I'm not sure I have easy answers to Hilda. But I think in a lot of ways, she's my favorite character in the play. What about the symbolism of the tower? Solness shifts from building churches, towers to God, to homes for people that don't have towers. And finally, in this villa that he's building for his family, he's adding a ridiculously high tower. What does that final architectural gesture symbolize about his changing spiritual state, his relationship with God, with the spiritual realm, and his desire to cement a legacy, to preserve his legacy? What do artists, I'm thinking more symbolically here, just artists in general, like as they age, how do they want to be remembered? Do they want to go out on a peak, or is there other ways to leave this mortal coil? Different artists answer that differently. We can also look at the wife, Aileen, and her grief. There's some very curious lines in the play where she's more sad, mourning the loss of her dolls. I guess she had like a doll collection when the house burned down. She mourns them more than her own deceased infant boys. It's disturbing. What does this unsettling revelation say about the nature of duty? Duty is a word we often associate with Aileen. She she's doing so much anymore just out of duty towards her husband, but there's not a lot of feeling behind it. And what does it say about the emotional devastation of her marriage and the stifling social expectations placed on women in Ibsen's era? I mean, Ibsen is a great champion of strong women in his plays. Nora from A Doll's House comes to mind, Hedda Gabler comes to mind, but these are often women put in tragic circumstances. They don't have a lot of liberal leeway to move around. And I also think Aileen's probably suffering from some PTSD. So you could look at her character and the role she plays. You could look at the theme of genius, artistic genius in the play. So Solness views his talent not as a gift, but as a curse that required him to sacrifice his family's happiness and lives for his architectural greatness. Is Ibsen implying that true artistic genius is inherently parasitic, requiring the artist, the creator, to drain the life out of the people around them? You know, he's got a big artistic ego. He sort of sucks the air out of the room. He's a dominant power force in the office and at home. And it seems like he's sort of draining the people around him. They're not very happy. We could look at the architecture of aging in the play. Solness builds a massive, very impractical, ridiculous tower to his new villa to prove that he's still a relevant architect, a master builder. Then he ultimately falls to his death while trying to ascend it, to conquer it, to mount it. And how does this ambition reflect his terror of aging and his final climb? Is that, this is a bit of a repeat, but is that an act of triumphant artistic rebirth, regeneration, or is it just this pathetic refusal to accept his own decline? Some people don't know when to hang up the cleats. This is another interesting take on the play, the theme of vampirism and ambition. So Hilda here comes to mind. She is really absorbed, fascinated with Solness's past greatness as a master builder. When she was 13, this must have been very formative for her to see him up there, high up. And Solness uses Hilda's youth to artificially revitalize his fading creative energies. So he's like sucking on the life from her, vampire style, right, to revitalize his creative juices. She seems to be a vampire on him, sucking out his greatness, wanting to like absorb his genius. What do you make of their relationship? Is it a genuine meeting of artistic minds? Are they both artistic geniuses? Is Solness like her artistic product that she's making, she's forming? Or is it just mutually destructive? When you suck the life out of someone, you die. Like, you know, you're drained, you're weak. So we've got some psychological vampirism that has to be sorted through in this play. And finally, we can think about Solness is sabotaging the career of his young assistant, Ragnar, out of a fear of being replaced. He needs to keep Ragnar in-house and not become like a competitor. And in the context of artistic creation, is Solness's cruelty toward the younger generation a natural instinct for self-preservation, or does it prove that he has transitioned from a creator into a destroyer? When you're played out artistically, does that then kind of turn you into a more of a destructive force than a creative force? So you can see there are some deep themes going on in this very strange little play by Ibsen. I hope if you're reading along that you enjoyed the play. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Have you seen good productions of it? Have you seen this film? I recommend this one. And if you have questions or responses to these discussion topics, feel free to either send me an email or just comment down below. Thanks as always for watching. We have one more reading on our year one program, and that is moving into the 20th century. We're now in modern science in our 1990 set. And the author is Erwin Schrödinger, the physicist. And he has a long essay called What is Life? What a way to round out the year one program. That should be fun. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about where Master Builder falls in this playlist too, because I have been thinking a lot about that. Like, why did the creators of the list, the reading program, why did they put the Master Builder in at the end of year one like this? I can't quite make it fit, but I haven't thought enough about it. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Peace out.